Good morning, everybody. After quite a long time, we are again talking about immunity. In our previous lectures, we had talked about innate immunity. Innate immunity, you know that this is the primary defense which is active in a living organism. Innate immunity is mostly non-specific, whereas the adaptive immunity comes as a second level of defense, which is rather active against the more specific pathogens. Before we talk further, we can initially summarize the differences between the innate and adaptive immune responses. These differences can be categorized in certain categories, like reaction time. If we look at the innate immune response, the reaction time is immediate. This immunity is immediate. The moment the pathogen enters inside the body immediately reacts against that pathogen, and that pathogen is either killed or by some of the means of the defense mechanism, the body is going to be protected against that pathogen. Comparing to the reaction time of the innate immune response, adaptive immune response is little delayed because it has its own activation time, so it do not react immediately. Similarly, if we talk about the response mediators, the innate immune response is being generated by cytokines and cells, whereas the adaptive immune response is being generated by the antibodies which are secreted in the blood by the lymphocytes. Now, if we talk about the memory, there is no memory about the innate immune response, and every time the pathogens again attack against the body, they have to be recognized in the same fashion as they have been recognized initially. So the innate immune response do not have a specific memory, whereas this adaptive immune response has got a memory. And because of this reason, it happens that whenever it happens that the second exposure to the same kind of pathogen happens in the body, usually it happens that this second exposure comes with intense responses comparing to the first exposure with the same pathogen, because after the first exposure the body has got a memory against that pathogen, and because of that memory the second responses against the same pathogen is supposed to be more intense comparing to the earlier response. If we talk about the specification of these two immune responses, the innate immune response is generic, which is active against all members of the group of the pathogen. For example, the innate immune response is rather more active against the preliminary kind of pathogens like bacteria and viruses, whereas the adaptive immune response is rather more specific and it is different for every individual pathogen. The effect of the innate immune response is short-lasting. It remains for quite some time, quite a little time, whereas the adaptive immune response is long-lasting and it may even last for the whole of the life. So once you are infected with some kind of disease, possibly it is not going to get infected again because you already have developed a lifelong immunity against that disease or that pathogen with the help of the adaptive immune response. And this availability about this innate immune response or innate immunity is available inherently in every individual. The moment you get born, you are born with this capability to protect yourself with certain kind of primitive pathogens. So this is inherently available in every individual, whereas the adaptive immune response is to be learned, or it is rather being developed as a response to a new pathogen which you are going to get exposed during the lifetime. So these are the differences between the innate immune response and adaptive immune responses. Now let us look at what the adaptive immunity is. So adaptive immunity, because it is not available already when you are born, it is being acquired, it is being developed, it is also being called as acquired immunity. It is a subsystem of the immune system involving specialized cells and processes to eliminate specific pathogens. This is a learned defense process tuned to deal with a specific type of invaders. Adaptive immunity is triggered when a pathogen evades the innate immune system. Naturally, when the innate immune system fails to operate, it is the turn of the adaptive immunity to work to protect the body at that time. So the conditions when adaptive immunity is going to get triggered is, there are three conditions, three important conditions. One is if the body feels that there is a sustained and enormous presence of the pathogen. This is called as threshold signal. If the body perceives that the pathogen which is available in the body is unrecognizable, that is the stranger signal. Or if the body perceives that the pathogen which is available in the body has got a very high virulence, that is the danger signal. This can be summarized here. When the body perceives that the antigens are reaching a threshold level, there is enormous amount of the antigen which is available in the body, and the innate immunity is not able to handle with that amount of the antigens. The second could be the body is identifying some stranger antigen which it is not exposed to deal with. So the identification of a stranger antigen, and finally identification of a virulent antigen. If the body is able to see that there is something which is extremely virulent and innate immune system is not able to handle with that. So this is the time when adaptive immunity is going to operate. Okay, now we look at how this adaptive immune system is actually getting activated. So adaptive immune system is a reserved and specialized defense system which is being called upon the innate immune system only when it finds, as we talked earlier, that the threat is greater than its actual handling capacity. The threat has a sustainability. The threat composes of newer antigens the innate immune system is not primed for, and the threat has a mechanism to evade primary defense. So what happens? Initially, when a pathogen invades the body, it is the innate immune system which starts operating. But the moment it sees that possibly innate immune system is not really able to handle the kind of pathogen or kind of antigens which are invading the body, it immediately alerts the higher immune system or the next level of the defense. So some people or some cells which are also the part of the innate immune system immediately rush and go further to inform the adaptive immune system and to alert them that, see, there is a pathogen which is not being handled or which could not be handled by the innate immune system. So the next defense level has to be alerted or has to be prepared to deal with this newer kind of pathogen. So this is a very nice verse from Sundarkand Ramayana, which simply says that when this kind of trouble happens, some people, there are certain kind of reserved people who are going to call or who are going to alert the next defense system. Okay. Now, we see that there are two defense systems in the body. One is the innate defense system and second is the adaptive defense system. How do we actually bridge them? I mean, who are those operators which work in between, so that when we see that the body's innate immune system is failing to operate or failing to deal with the pathogen which is invading the body, they are going to alert the next level of the defense or next level of the defense system. So the most important of these substances or these cells which are going to bridge between these two defense systems are two. One is the dendritic cell and another is the innate-like adaptive immune cell. These two cells are primarily acting as a bridge between these two defense systems. These cells become active as part of the early innate immune response and are intimately involved in alarming the adaptive immune system. Dependent on the type of the pathogen, a specific pathogen recognition receptor, innate-like adaptive immune cells are triggered, leading to the production of a specific cytokines and chemokines. And this production polarizes the immune response towards efficient killing of the pathogen. So this is how, these two cells are primarily the part of the innate immune system. The dendritic cell and innate-like adaptive immune cells are the part of the innate immunity. But the moment they see that the pathogen is not being handled adequately by the innate system, they immediately rush and immediately alert the adaptive immune system or adaptive defense system. So the dendritic cells are the most important bridge between this innate immune system and adaptive immune system. It is very interesting to see that how the dendritic cell actually acts. Dendritic cells are usually the part of the innate immune system which is being circulated everywhere in the body, especially in the peripheral parts of the body, which has a larger possibility of getting exposed to the antigens from the outside environment. It may be the food, it may be the gastrointestinal system, it may be the respiratory system, it may be the skin, it may be the joints, where the external pathogen or external antigen may invade because of a trauma on the skin or trauma at the joint. So dendritic cells are the part of the innate immune system which is being circulated everywhere in the body. So they get an opportunity to expose to the microbes. And the moment they are getting exposed to the microbes, they immediately identify if it is some new antigen which they are not able to recognize. So what they do upon exposure to microbes, dendritic cells are triggered through their pathogen recognizing receptors. The pathogens are having certain receptors, certain molecular patterns. So they have this, the dendritic cells are having this pattern recognizing receptors. And after this recognition of the pathogen, these dendritic cells undergo a process of maturation, and finally they migrate to the lymphoid organs to activate T lymphocytes. This is the function of the dendritic cell. We'll talk about the function of the dendritic cell in more detail further. Further to the identification of a pathogen, there is a priming of dendritic cell. They undergo a specific maturation process, and during this maturation, you see what happens. This is the pathogen. Pathogen is being recognized by the dendritic cell. Dendritic cell captures this pathogen, engulfs it in the form of a phagosome. In the phagosome, it digests it, fragments it, and subsequently these digested fragments of the pathogen, the part of the pathogen, are being represented over the outer cell wall or cell membrane of the dendritic cell in the form of a. So this requires a series of steps involving ingestion of the pathogen by phagocytosis, digestion into the fragments, and presentation of fragments on their cell membrane, major histocompatibility complex, that is the MHC molecule, and these are the MHC molecule So you see that here the pathogen has got recognized by the dendritic cell, it got ingested, it got digested here with the help of the phagosomes, it got fragmented, the specific part of the fragments or these fragments are further represented on the outer side of the cell membrane of the dendritic cell, attached with the major histocompatibility complex, that is the MHC molecules. Here the fragments of the pathogen are being represented outside the cell, outside the dendritic cell. So this is the maturation of the dendritic cell. So now dendritic cell is ready to present these antigens which it has identified earlier, and it has broken it into small fragments, and these fragments are being represented on the outer membrane of the dendritic cell, and this way the dendritic cell is now ready to present these antigens to the next level of the functionaries, that is the T cell and B cell or the lymphocytes. So now the next stage comes, that antigen which is being taken up by the dendritic cell is going to be presented to the T cell. So what happens? T cells are going to recognize that what kind of antigen is being presented and whether they have got a proper receptor to recognize those antigens or not. So how this at this juncture, how this interpretation or how this identification is going to take place. So take this example, that when you arrive at the airport and you do not know that where to go, and if you have somebody to receive you who has not seen you earlier, how they are going to recognize you? They might be having a play card in their hand, so that they can immediately recognize. And you can immediately recognize your name, and you can immediately rush to the gentleman name play card. So exactly the same kind of phenomenon is being adapted by during the process of the antigen presentation and T cell recognition. What happens? This is the dendritic cell. See, this is the dendritic cell, which is having an antigen over its outer membrane, and it is trying to present it to the helper T cell or to the T cell. So what happens? On the dendritic cell surface, each major histocompatibility complex molecule displays a molecular fraction of a protein which we call as antigen for its ready recognition by the T cell. So T cell is now going to see that whether this antigen is suiting to me, I am recognizing it or not. There are possibilities that T cell is not going to recognize, and it is going to refuse that, no, I am not going to take this antigen any further. And if they recognize, there could be a sort of immunological sign, dendritic cell and T cell. If they recognize, if the T cell recognizes the kind of antigen which is being presented by the dendritic cell, there would be a kind of immunological synapse which is going to lead to the priming of the T cell or maturation of the T cell further. And there can be certain major histocompatibility complex restriction, and in that way all the antigens are not going to be recognized by every T cell. So there are certain specific T cell which are going to recognize a specific kind of pathogen or a specific kind of antigen which is being presented by the dendritic cell. So there can be three conditions. There can be two conditions basically. One is the recognition, and here you can see very easily that this is the antigen, this X is the antigen which is being presented by the antigen presenting cell here. It is presented at this major histocompatibility complex, and you see that this shape of this antigen is suitably fitting to the shape of T cell as well. So T cell is in a position to recognize this antigen, and it easily takes it up. This is the another case where this antigen is not being recognized by the T cell because it is not having its receptor is not shaped to recognize this particular shape of the antigen, and similar is this case also. here also this antigen is not going to be recognized by this T cell. So there are conditions that antigens are going to be recognized by the T cells, and there are the conditions that antigens are not going to be recognized by the T cells. So what body is going to do when it is not going to be not being recognized by specific T cells? Dendritic cells that have captured antigens, what happens next? Dendritic cells that have captured antigens in peripheral tissue, that is the skin, respiratory mucosa and GI tract, enter into the lymph node. T cell and B cells are activated. Activated means they are proliferated and differentiated. These activated lymphocytes are prompted to spread to areas where the adaptive immune effector responses are required. Now, we see that the body, because we see that lymph nodes play a very, very important role in priming of the T cells and B cells. So, because of that reason, the body has got a very, very big, very, very complex and integrated system of lymph nodes in the body. We see that all places which may have a possibility of getting encountered with antigens, either from food, air, or through trauma, are richly protected with an extensive network of lymph nodes. You see that a massive network of the lymph node is available in the respiratory system, and the similar kind of extensive network of the lymph node is also available in our gastrointestinal tract, because these are the areas where a large possibility of antigen encounter or the pathogen encounter is possible. In GI tract it is possible because a lot of different kind of antigens are coming in the body by means of the food, and in respiratory system a lot of antigens or the pathogens are coming by means of the air. So these places are richly protected by the lymph nodes. Now a very important phenomenon happens. I mean, we earlier have talked about that there are possibilities that the T cells are not going to recognize the antigen which are being presented by the dendritic cell. So what happens in that case? A very interesting phenomenon takes place by that time, and this phenomenon says that to increase the chance of antigen recognition, T and B cells are dynamically recirculating through the lymph node until they identify the right antigen as per their own suitability. So to increase the chance of antigen recognition, T and B cells dynamically recirculate through lymph nodes while antigen can be retained. The antigen which is required to be identified by a specific T cell or B cell would be retained by the lymph node. Dendritic cells maybe for many weeks. I mean, it would be retained by the lymph node until or unless the suitable or the proper T cell and B cell is available to recognize it. So this is a very interesting phenomenon. This can be matched. I mean, this dynamic recirculation can be represented through this way. When you go to the market in search of some specific item, in search of a specific thing, you keep on wandering the market, you keep on searching the market until or unless you find something which you were really intending to get for. So for this reason, I mean, in a similar context, what the this T cell and B cell are doing in the body to increase the chance of the antigen recognition, T cell and B cell dynamically recirculate continuously through lymph node while antigen can be retained by lymph node dendritic cell for many weeks. So we are finishing here today, and we'll be continuing talking about how the adaptive immune system actually works. Thank you.